Hello and welcome to this special public policy discussion series. I'm joined by Professor S P Kothari, Gordon Y. Billard, Professor of Accounting and Finance at the Sloan School of Management at MIT. Thank you so much for speaking with us. Let me ask you a very general question, and that perhaps will launch us into something more specific. What holds back a country like India in the context of innovation?
Innovation is rather resource intensive, and innovation also requires several things to come together. It's not by itself, but great students or young entrepreneurs have to be there, academic institutions, faculty who are incentivized to innovate. You need capital, so venture capitalists, angel investors, banks, they have to come together. And also equally importantly, the government has to be friendly, regulation has to be not burdensome, property rights have to be enforced, meaning thereby courts and litigation system has to be conducive and not hold people back or tie them up in lawsuits for extended periods of time. And unfortunately, the story of India has been that there is abundant talent, there is tremendous entrepreneurial zeal, but some of the other elements haven't quite come together as well as we would like to. There are signs of that. We see those green shoots now, but we have some ways to go.
Right. So let me now talk about manufacturing specifically. So manufacturing, we have targets. We have a jobs challenge. We have the millions coming out into the workforce, and we need to create jobs for them. Manufacturing is perhaps the only area that can absorb them, and yet we are faced with a temporary problem of overcapacity and a longer-term problem of automation and fundamental changes in the landscape, and whether or not India can even get there. Yeah. How do we address this, or where do we begin?
So, couple of things. First and foremost, manufacturing is very infrastructure intensive. So unless you get that in order, it won't happen. And what India does, and these are political demands make them do that, is that the scarce resources are sprinkled everywhere, so that the hope is that, well, we will have some infrastructure in all parts of India. Politically, that might be the right thing, or that might be the only avenue. But from the standpoint of supporting manufacturing, it's going to be a challenge. So they have to come to grips with whether we have some export zones or some other means by which we facilitate manufacturing. Second thing that the government has to recognize is manufacturing is highly capital intensive. So the foreign direct investment, you have to make yourself really attractive for foreigners to invest in India. And the only litmus test of that is, have you received that foreign investment? If you haven't made yourself attractive enough. Don't tell me that we have made it good enough. The way we are going to judge the country is, or the policies is by where is the beef, or that probably is the wrong term to use right now, but you know what, yeah. The way in which I am saying is that you have to show output, actual investment, then we will say that the policies have been good. I will quickly make a third point, that we also have to be realistic. The world is not large enough to buy the output of 1.35 billion people that India has. Already Chinese, there are 1.4 billion people, and there is Vietnam and Philippines and Thailand and many other countries. On top of that 1.3 billion Indians, the world isn't large enough to absorb the output of such a large population, so we have to be realistic how far exports can go. But nonetheless, they have to serve as a catalyst. We have to make all attempts to make ourselves competitive and let manufacturing blossom here.
Right. So let me sort of ask you the same question, or flip it around a little bit. So one of the challenges when we talk about developing a manufacturing base is also helping smaller enterprises in the manufacturing space again. And there are many good examples from Europe, for instance, where small enterprises are really the backbone of the economy and have helped flourish, and also are the seats of innovation. Is that something that can be policy driven, or?
Yeah. Yes and no. I mean, the small scale industries that we talk about, if you have a Subway, okay, for example, or KFC or McDonald's, those are small operations. Yes, those can be done there. But manufacturing, even the small one is pretty large. Okay? When you are competing, the scale economies are tremendous when it comes to manufacturing. You can be producing with 6 people and $1 million investment or something. That simply is not going to happen. Small firms are outstanding when it comes to innovation. Okay, they can come up with some new efficiency-based model or new tweak in the production technology, and we should support that. We should incubate a whole lot of those, but there has to be a way out for those, meaning thereby some other large firms that can scale it up has to buy it, and that's what happens. That's what happens in Silicon Valley, that's what happens in the US and in many parts of the world, and that's the model that we want to go for, rather than our romance with the small and tiny corporation. They are simply not competitive in the world economy, especially from a supply chain standpoint.
Right. So you're saying bring in the big investors and the big investment, and everything else shall follow in the right competitive context.
Right. But innovation can take place in small units, and that's why entrepreneurs, they will, if you have angel investors and VCs, if you have government regulation that is facilitating as opposed to obstructive, if you have academic institutions where faculty are provided with tremendous incentive to innovate and retain the upside, and amazing student body, which we already have. So all of them have to come together, and they can come together in small areas, not sprinkled all over the country, but in some concentrated areas, and that's where these things will blossom.
Right. So you talked about, the world not being big enough to absorb all the output potentially from a country like India. So give us this is more an economic question, I guess, or a global economy question. So where then lie the opportunities for countries like India?
What I'm saying is that can serve as a catalyst, but we cannot hope that 400 million people could be employed in manufacturing sector, and the world is large enough to absorb the output of these 400 million on top of several hundred million from other. That's the point I'm trying to make, that ultimately we have to keep enhancing productivity and serve mainly the needs domestically. I was talking to the central banker of Austria, and at one point he said, well, everybody wants to export, but for every dollar of export, someone has to import that. And who is going to import if we are really competitive and start manufacturing huge amount of outputs, then who will be at the other end importing all of that? Now, that doesn't mean that there are zero opportunities, so don't get me wrong. I'm saying that can serve as a catalyst and can help us get started, but it's a long road, and we will have to lift ourselves up a lot more, and it's not an easy solution that we can export and become rich.
So let me ask you a sort of more specific and last and current question.
Okay.
When you look at the emerging markets today, you had the BRICS phenomenon and the BRICS fund shut down, and so where does India stand today from your vantage point, and particularly when you look at emerging markets, and is this a good opportunity to maybe pull ourselves up on some areas where we've not in the past, or?
We have many areas where we ought to be. Cyprus has population of 800,000, and they get 2 million tourists a year. Okay, India has beautiful beaches and others, but we don't have. I just came back from Goa, and it seems so fragmented. There are some big hotels and this and that, but everything is tiny. Whereas you go to the Caribbean, or you go to Mexico, you go to Cyprus, and what you find is very well organized ways in which they have attracted tourism. Medical business, there are immense opportunities for medical services to be delivered efficiently. Sports and entertainment, I think it's a shame that IPL has only 6 or 8 teams. US, with much smaller population, has 30 or 32 teams in baseball, in football, in basketball, and in hockey. So the capacity is much more, and why does it have to be restricted only to India? Why can't the IPL have team from Kuala Lumpur and from Singapore and from Dubai and Sharjah and others. I just don't think we have thought through carefully. Why does the entire railway system have to be single firm? Why can it not be divided into 3 firms and let them compete even if it is owned by the government? So there are ways in which to think about it and bring out the best that India can offer, and that's what needs to be done. Unless we actually do that, I don't think we are going to be exciting enough. The foreign direct investment is only about $30 billion, which is literally, even 10 years ago, China had about 7-8 times that amount of foreign direct investment. The path to growth is going to be foreign direct investment. That would be an essential component of it, and unless we make ourselves attractive for foreign investors to write that check and invest, we haven't done enough, and we have ways to go.
Right. Professor Kothari, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.